freedom fighter to the nation's first president, and the ongoing influence of his leadership on modern-day Namibia. To discuss the legacy of the late founding father and Namibia's first president, Dr. Sam Nujoma, we're joined by political analyst Rui Tyitende. Rui, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Nina.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, of course, a lot has been said over the last 2 days, and I think there's much more that can be said as well. And we're really trying to get, I don't know if saying a bird's eye view, but, cover all angles of who this great statesman was, this family man, as many as referred to him as. Many of his peers have referred to him as a father figure, which I find quite interesting because, as the average Namibian, we never knew that side of him. And of course, today we're gauging your views as well. As I said, President Sam Nujoma was, a pivotal figure in Namibia's fight for independence. How would you describe his leadership style, during the liberation struggle? A period, of course, that I know you weren't a part of. But in your learned view, what are your sentiments?
Well, look, there is no shortage of agreement that the founding president was an icon of liberation, an icon of social justice, an icon of unity, and I can sum it up that he was actually the godfather of Namibian politics, pre-independence and post-independence. There will be no equal to Sam Shafiishuna Nujoma. Off record, we just spoke about by the time he stepped down as the founding president, I was in grade 11.
Right.
We were actually beneficiaries of his mantra of education for every Namibian child. And it was within that spirit that we got to know of Sam Nujoma, of course, through history lessons and also through conversations with our seniors in the house. And if you look at what he has done prior to independence, I just read an interesting story this morning about his legacy, where when he was in exile, he used to spend most of his time in hotel rooms because he was so busy advocating for Namibia's liberation from the yoke of apartheid. So that shows you and illustrates the kind of determination that he had to liberate Namibia. Post-independence, I think he had the most difficult task of governing Namibia, considering the fact that we have just emerged from a very violent past, and he had to unite all of the various factions, the political formations, the different races, the different ethnic groups that all didn't know where we were going as a country. And we don't give him enough credit for what he has done in that respect. His notion of what it is to be a Namibian. He didn't like people looking for handouts, rather it should be hands out, kind of approach to leadership. He was charismatic when he speaks. For someone that didn't have formal qualifications at an undergraduate level.
Extremely well spoken.
Extremely well conversed in conveying a message. He could lead people and people will willingly follow. So that's the kind of leader that he was. And I think many Namibians will emulate his leadership style. I hope we do as a country during this dark period. And it's rather unfortunate that President Bumba had to be the one with the moral and political obligation to announce the death of two statesmen. President Geinkop, that we lost during the same period last year, and now founding President Sam Nujoma, and these were both his comrades. I think it's also a difficult time for him, and I would also like to extend my deepest condolences to the family, to the Nujoma family, his grandchildren, his children, and the entire Namibian populace.
Thank you so much, Rui. You also mentioned to me that you had engaged some international media houses who also wanted to, of course, get your 2 cents and your thoughts on the life and legacy of Namibia's founding president. In your conversations that you've had with them, your interactions you've had with them, and you'll have some more, what is your sort of understanding or gist of what their thoughts on Namibia's founding president was?
Well, look, the founding president was an internationally known figure, and I think he was one of the most influential leaders in Southern Africa and in Africa because of his stance on Pan-Africanism, having this united vision for Africa with the likes of Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, the Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Samora Machel of Mozambique, Eduardo dos Santos Agostinho Neto of Angola, Robert Mugabe of Mugabe. So he was part of this creme de la creme of Southern African liberation movements that were at the forefront of advocating for the complete and utter liberation of African countries. And 2 years ago, I was in Germany, in Berlin. In fact, wherever I go outside of Namibia, people always ask me, how is the founding president, Sam Nujoma? Is he still okay? I said, yeah, he's in good spirit. He exercises. He's so passionate about the vision that he has crafted for Namibia. And I think his persona actually transcended beyond the body politic of Namibia.
Yeah.
He was well known. And of course, there were also those that criticize him for a litany of things, whether you agree or disagree with them. And I think no individual is perfect.
Yeah.
The only person that is perfect is the person that has not been born yet.
Rui, what were, in your opinion, some of his most defining qualities as a revolutionary leader?
I think it was his ability to be decisive, whether you agreed with the decision that he makes or not. You can remember the time where we had the controversial amendment to the Constitution to grant him a third term. There were some voices within government, within the party, even some of his close comrades that said, no, comrade, you can't do this. We're a democracy, but he was able to persuade them one way or another, and he got his third term. Interestingly enough, that amendment only applied to him.
Yeah.
So we didn't have another statesman that was in power for more than 2 terms. It ended with him. But overall, one thing that one can also talk about the legacy of the founding president is that he was very adamant and passionate about unity in diversity.
Yes.
You know, the whole one Namibia, one nation. And that actually was reflected in his first cabinet, because he also appointed people that were not part of the governing party SWAPO. He appointed people from the opposition, people from different ethnic groups, people from different races. So it shows you the kind of vision that he had for the country,
Yes.
because he was cognizant of the heterogeneous nature of the Namibians. Even if it's a copy from South Africa, Rainbow Nation. And I think as a country, for the past, we're going now for 35 years, we actually need to applaud ourselves, despite the challenges that we have. We need to applaud ourselves as being one of those African countries that has not seen the emergence of violent conflict post-independence.
100%, 100%. What lasting political systems or policies, Rui, did Nujoma implement that are still in place today?
Well, key amongst them would be Vision 2030. And the policy documents that would allow Vision 2030 to be realized, which is the NDPs, the National Development Plans.
Right.
As to whether they have been a success, it's up for debate. We also know that he was very fond of young people ascending to the corridors of power. That's why he appointed the current Prime Minister at the tender age, was it 26, 29, to be the Director General of the National Planning Commission, Asara Kongola Amadila. So it showed you the kind of leader that he was, the faith that he had in young people.
Yes.
And I also think other leaders emulated that from him, even though it was not to the extent where they were appointed in prominent position to have a meaningful impact on society.
Of course, we shared that, the former president, Dr. Sam Nujoma, was the president of our youth, my youth as well. And of course, we have, fond memories of him. And so far, you've highlighted, of course, yes, there are opposing views or opinions on him, but your reiteration so far has been really positive in terms of what he stood for, his leadership, and the legacy that he's left Namibia behind. But do you think that, there were areas in his leadership where he might have fallen short?
Well, I think your previous question was on the policy initiatives that he pursued or that he introduced. I think key amongst them was the policy of national reconciliation. I would like to call it the politics of national reconciliation, because the main idea was that despite the fact that we have been embroiled in this violent conflict pre-independence, we are now an independent country, so those crimes that have been committed then, we will forgive each other and forge a national identity. But there are still other people that feel that their wounds have not healed completely.
Yeah.
Because reconciliation is about mending broken relationships and ensuring that violent conflicts are managed peacefully.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate objective of conflict resolution. There was the issue of the Lubango dungeons. Some people still feel that their cousins that have disappeared in Angola, their mothers, their brothers, the detainees that were under the management of SWAPO, those crimes have not been answered. So if you're talking about reconciliation, you need to have a meaningful dialogue like the one that was had in South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I think that's where he fell short. And also under his leadership, when the notion of black economic empowerment came in, many people felt that the cake was only distributed amongst a few people. Not everyone was able to benefit from it. And that still persists till today. We can go on and on, but I think for now, since we are mourning the founding president as Africans, we need to look at his legacy, because if we only focus on the positive, we are not really telling a true reflection of what he stood for. As I said earlier, no human being is perfect. But we need to know him and give credit where it's due.
Yeah. In hindsight, Rui, hindsight is such a beautiful thing. How would you summarize, Sam Nyoma's overall impact, not only on Namibia, but also on Africa?
Well, Sam Nujoma, his vision for Pan-Africanism was bold, it was courageous, and it was something that he always thought that Namibia belongs to all Africans. One of his famous speeches, because he knew that the struggle was so difficult and bitter, and Namibians, especially the leadership of SWAPO and other political formations, they were hosted by countries like Angola, like Zambia, like Tanzania. Countries like Sweden provided support, so did Cuba. So he thought that we are actually indebted to these countries. So once we become independent, there's no way we can claim Namibia for ourselves, because where we are today is because of others. It's the typical Ubuntu analogy, that I am because of others. Hence, I need to reciprocate in whatever possible way what others have done for me. And I think we lack that in today's society, not only in the political space, but in the social space as well. We tend to pursue this independent-minded kind of approach to how we conduct things. But that's not who we are as Africans. We are who we are because our community constructed us that way.
Is there a particular lesson, from his leadership that political leaders today could learn from?
Humbleness, humility. If you can recall, Nina, there was a time in the late 90s that President Nujoma traveled to Kaokoland to go and meet Chief Kapika about the hydro dam. And, he was actually, the Chief Kapika was very critical of Nujoma. But, he just smiled and he listened. This was the head of state being addressed by a traditional leader. It was very critical of Sam Nujoma. But he didn't castigate him back. He treated Chief Kapika with respect. He actually persuaded him on numerous occasions as to the value of the dam to the community of Kaokoland. And that tells you something about the character of who Nujoma was. Humility, being humble, being able to speak to the ordinary person, and just allowing that division of the hierarchy of power not to be there. And I think that's something remarkable in him that we hardly talk about.
As a renowned political analyst in Namibia, Rui, and possibly, of course, outside of Namibia as well, what are some of your personal lessons that you've drawn from the life and leadership of founding President Dr. Sam Nujoma?
One thing that I have emulated from Sam Nujoma's leadership style in terms of his character is that one should always treat other human beings, no matter your seniority, as a human being first of all. Don't ask for their positions. Treat them for who they are, and be candid about what you say.
Yeah.
And people always tended to say, Nujoma was loved and he was feared. But I think he was loved more than actually feared. But as a leader, sometimes you need to instill discipline, and people tend to confuse that as fear.
Yes. Rui, we really appreciate your time with us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're
and
most
sharing.
welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll be back shortly after this brief break. Do stay with us here on NBC One.